All right. Again, if you are not one of our speakers, please have your camera off and stay on mute. We will have time for questions at the end, but we will get started now with Judith Enck, President of Beyond Plastics.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm Judith Enck, E-N-C-K. I'm president of Beyond Plastics and former EPA regional administrator during the Obama administration and co-author of this new book, The Problem with Plastic, which is really a good book that you should all read. Um, we are here today to share some very compelling new financial information about savings that can be experienced by local taxpayers by adoption of the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. We're sharing new data that looks at 9 selected communities across New York State, including our largest city, New York City, and we document that more than $400 million can be saved by local taxpayers every single year after adoption of this state law. Just briefly, what this bill does is require a 30% reduction in single-use plastic packaging over 12 years. It bans the 17 most toxic chemicals used to make packaging, including chemicals like the entire family of PFAS chemicals, lead, mercury, formaldehyde. Today, all of those chemicals are used in packaging that touch our food and our beverage. The bill also puts a modest fee on packaging, with that money flowing to local governments and in some instances the private sector to reinvest money in recycling, but more importantly, money for waste reduction, reuse, and refill. The cheapest solid waste strategy is when you don't have to manage the solid waste at all. There's an exciting history on this bill. It is sponsored by the Environmental Conservation Committee chairs in both houses. It has passed the state Senate 2 years in a row. And we thank Senator Harckham and Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins for their leadership. On the Assembly side, it's made it through all the necessary committees last legislative session, but never came up for a vote on the floor of the Assembly. However, it is currently on the Assembly floor and has a calendar number, which is calendar number 68, meaning it can come up at any time for a vote. Today, we are calling on Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie to bring this bill up for a vote on the Assembly floor. We need this to happen sooner rather than later. The financial implications of this bill are very compelling. There was a very little noticed report that was released in October 2025 by the Center for Sustainable Materials Management in Syracuse, commissioned by the state of New York. That report says that recycling costs in the entire state is about $788 million every single year. So, with just the 9 communities that we analyzed today, those savings are $411 million, and that could cover more than half of the statewide recycling cost. This is particularly important in New York City. New York City has no landfills and thankfully no garbage incinerators. So they truck waste up to the Finger Lakes, to landfills, or to polluting garbage incinerators in Newark, New Jersey. And New York City taxpayers are spending more than $500 million every single year exporting waste. So if you look at the news release, there's a handy little chart that shows the annual financial benefits. And then after the chart is a series of fact sheets. And I just want to explain the financial element of this analysis. There are 2 things to pay attention to. The first is avoided waste management costs. So when you have less packaging in the market, that means it's less material to be collected, processed, and either sent to a landfill, incinerator, or recycled. So that's the first big economic impact, the concept of avoided cost. Then there's more. Local governments will receive money, new revenue, to help pay for their local recycling and waste reduction programs. That money will come from new fees on packaging. So if you look at the data for New York City, for instance, the avoided cost of disposal just in 1 year will be $114.2 million. And then the new revenue coming to the city of New York will be $380.5 million. So that is an enormous savings for New York City taxpayers. Savings in Hempstead, Islip, Yonkers, Oyster Bay, North Hempstead, Syracuse, Smithtown, and Buffalo. So we think this is the year for the legislature to take action. Some of the most important voices in this debate have been those of local governments. These are local governments who have to carry this burden. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Mark Ryder. Mark is the executive director of the Ulster County Resource Recovery Agency.
Thank you, Judith. And thanks for the introduction and your advocacy and you and your team's advocacy on this issue. As the agency that's responsible for handling solid waste in Ulster County, we receive roughly 100,000 tons of municipal solid waste per year. Most of that waste is trucked 250 miles each way to Seneca Meadows landfill at a cost to the agency of $10 million annually. Half of that MSW is made up of plastic and paper, with much of that being packaging. The 30% reduction in packaging called for under PREA would save the agency roughly $1 million a year and would add an additional revenue source to focus on reduction, reuse, and recycling. We have set a goal at the agency to divert 90% of our waste away from landfills and incineration by 2050. This is in line with the New York State Solid Waste Management Plan that calls for all responsible for waste to divert 85% during that same amount of time. One of the funding mechanisms in the New York State Solid Waste Management Plan is PREA. One of the ways we plan to reduce waste is the Repower Project. This is a comprehensive hub and spoke system for reuse and repair of household goods, textiles, building materials, and other reusables. We're in the planning stages of this project and we'll be selecting an operator for the Reuse Innovation Center in the near future. Currently, we fund projects like this through our tipping fee. It's vital that we have additional revenue source like PREA to help us take on more projects related to waste reduction. New York State is in the middle of a solid waste crisis. Landfill capacity is dwindling by the day. As a state, we send 25,000 tons of waste to in-state landfills daily. By the end of this year, we will have about 150 million tons of landfill capacity in the state, and there are no new landfills being built on the horizon. That means that without intervention, we'll run out of space in our landfills by 2043. The New York State Legislature must act. New York used to be considered a leader in environmental initiatives, but we would be the 8th state to sign on to extended producer responsibility for packaging in the US. This legislation has been held up for far too long. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. And we're really excited to be joined by Sam Fine. Sam is a former Albany County legislator and just took office when he was elected Chief City Auditor for the City of Albany. Thank you for joining us, Sam.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, everyone. So my name is Sam Fine. I'm the Chief City Auditor for the City of Albany. And here in Albany, we send our trash to our city-owned landfill, the Rapp Road landfill, which has been open since 1969. This year, Albany residents will pay $180 per household for their trash to be collected and brought to the landfill. That's double last year's fee. According to the 2026 city budget, the city will spend over $5 million on waste collection and recycling. And that's just for the waste collection part, not including operating the landfill. We also take in trash from surrounding municipalities at our landfill, private waste haulers serving businesses, institutions, construction and demolition waste. In 2026, the city of Albany is projected to bring in over $4.6 million in revenue from the landfill, more than offsetting the approximately $3.5 million that it costs to operate the landfill. But the Rapp Road landfill is nearly full, and like many landfills in the state, it's going to close soon, planned in 2028. For years, the landfill in Albany has actually been a major revenue generator for Albany taxpayers because of all of the waste that we bring in from other municipalities and entities. So this will all end in 2028 when it closes, and instead of city taxpayers earning money off of the landfill, we're going to have to pay money to dispose of our trash elsewhere. So this further highlights the need to find new ways to manage, transport, dispose of our waste, and to reduce the amount of waste. So it's estimated that it'll cost the city of Albany $25 million just to close the landfill and build a new waste transfer station. And this is just to build the facility, not the cost to actually ship the trash somewhere else. So this is why we need legislators to pass the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. We know there's no good way to dispose of trash. As landfills across the state like ours fill up and close, we need to reduce the amount of trash we create. So much of today's plastic packaging is unnecessary anyway. Companies are rewarded for wrapping products in layers of plastic to make their products seem safer or cleaner. But we know that plastic contains toxic chemicals and is harmful for our health. So by setting clear statewide limits to reduce plastic packaging, we would break that cycle and it would lower costs for taxpayers. I want to highlight this as an equity issue too. In Albany's Arbor Hill neighborhood, residents lived for years with a trash incinerator that caused massive amounts of air pollution. This was trash incinerator, the Answers plant. It was there, it powered the whole state complex, and the residents of this lower income neighborhood in Albany bore the consequences of that. So that incinerator closed, thankfully, although it did take the community, had to fight hard to stop the state from opening a fracked gas plant a few years ago to power the state complex. But also we know underserved communities in Peekskill and Niagara Falls are still breathing toxic chemicals from active incinerators. So if we pass the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, we'll reduce the amount of trash that New Yorkers pay to send to those incinerators and to landfills. And we'll bring in new funds paid by the industry causing the problem in the first place that can offset costs for municipalities and taxpayers even more. New Yorkers shouldn't have to pay more and more each year to manage a problem that we didn't create. And I'm urging the state legislature to pass the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act this year.
Thanks so much. That was Chief City Auditor in the City of Albany, Sam Fine, newly minted Chief City Auditor. We're
Just
now
2
going.
weeks in.
Wow, and you still like your job. Congrats. Let me introduce Blair Horner, who is NYPIRG's Senior Policy Advisor.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you all for being here. A few comments. I mean, when you go last, you always get to sort of just focus on a couple of key things, and so then we can get to your questions and answers. I mean, you heard a lot about affordability in the governor's State of the State address this week, but nothing really about this problem. And as Mark and Sam have pointed out, New York State is facing a serious solid waste crisis. Landfills are filling up, permits for landfills are running out, and the trash is mounting up, more and more trash all the time. And this is not a surprise, should not be a surprise, certainly to us, but it certainly shouldn't be one to the governor, since the second year anniversary of the New York State Solid Waste Management Plan was the end of December, just a few short weeks ago. In that report, The DEC estimated that landfills would have to close because of permitting running out or landfills filling up to capacity, and that the state faced a crisis. And in their report, they talked about the need for reducing the amount of packaging that had to be disposed of. So 2 years later, we're still talking about this. We have to move from talk to action, and that this is the year to get it done. The governor wants to talk about affordability. Let's make tax paying more affordable in the state of New York by helping to offset the costs of the trash that is produced by the companies that make it and make them bear the costs and not the New York State taxpayers. This is the year to do it. This bill is a critical component of the state response, and we're hoping that this year is the year to get it done. Back to you, Judith.
Thanks so much, Blair.